Electronic stores have been one of the most visible and important elements of retail in America for several decades. The devices that they have sold have brought Americans countless hours of entertainment, assistance in labor and tasks, along with many other things that have made life much easier. And while it can't be denied that electronics retail saw a major boom throughout the 1990s and well into the 2000s, it can also not be denied, though, that over the last 15 years or so, the industry has seen a major leveling off and in many cases decline, at least for several major companies involved. This is the electronics retail apocalypse of the 21st century. Throughout much of history, home electronics were quite limited, and if you did have them, they were very expensive. Over time though, particularly from the late 1970s onward, new types of electronics would come into the fold and be in demand by the average consumer. From VHS players and cassettes to new video game consoles, such as the Nintendo Entertainment System. With the rise of products like these would come the electronics retailer. As home computers, video game consoles, TVs, and home video evolved, a boom in demand for this type of retail would occur from the 1980s onward. Electronics stores such as CompUSA, Best Buy, Babbage's, now known today as GameStop, would take off, and this newer retail segment would become a mainstay throughout many companies. Hundreds upon hundreds of electronics retail stores would be established, whether it be Best Buy, Circuit City, Radioshack, or in the quickly expanding Walmart and Target stores. The momentum would continue strong into the 1990s, and the continuing cycle of obsolescence in these products only ensured that buyers would keep coming back. From the late 90s to the early 2000s, times were really good in electronics retail. Video games were more mainstream than ever before, and mobile phones would finally become mainstream for the average consumer. And while things seemed very good for a long time, and would continue to be so, even into the new millennium, conditions would not stay the same forever. The cracks in the foundation began to show in the late 2000s, with major chains such as CompUSA and Circuit City going out of business. While the industry itself was still relatively strong by the late 2000s decade, hundreds to thousands of electronics retail stores had opened during this decade. While companies such as Circuit City and CompUSA had many reasons for their declines, take a look at the growth of the competition. Best Buy grew from 357 stores in 2000 to over 1,000 by 2010. GameStop, a company that could operate with much less overhead due to smaller locations, went from 1,038 stores in 2002 to 6,450 by 2010. Walmart and Target, which both sold electronics, had massive expansions during this decade as well. On top of this, you had manufacturers starting to open their own stores for their products. Apple's store would begin in 2001 with just 25 locations. By 2010, it would have 317. Things would stay relatively stable for the next few years in the industry. However, it was at this point that new problems would arise. As time passed and technology advanced, the high prices and profits of electronics began to fall. You simply wouldn't need to pay thousands of dollars for a big screen TV anymore, nor would the same cycle of obsolescence occur much anymore. After videotapes went to DVDs, there was no new player that would replace it, except for digital media itself. And while Blu-rays would come along, they would just compete with DVDs rather than replace them. The same would go for CDs, and when smartphones became popular, you wouldn't even need a music player. Everything that made the electronics retail industry big was going to take it down, and it would start to come to a head with more retail closures. Radioshack, a 7,200 store chain as recently as 2010, closed thousands of stores during the 2010s decade, being reduced to a few hundred independently owned stores as of today, with the name and business being sold. FYE, another electronics retailer, would go down with malls, closing hundreds of stores from the late 2000s onward. H.H. Gregg, a over 200 store chain, would go out of business in 2017. GameStop, a chain that seemed like it was everywhere, closed over 2,000 locations between 2010 and 2022. So what happened? How could thousands of stores in this space have to either close or significantly downsize over a roughly 15-year period? Well, There are several reasons. The first wave of closures in the late 2000s was likely due to the overexpansion of electronics retail. Major national retail chains such as Best Buy, Walmart, and Target were expanding quickly. You no longer had to go to a specialty electronics store to buy electronics. As for the more significant second wave, there are just too many changing conditions in the industry. The prices of electronics are much cheaper than they used to be in general. The profits a retailer can make on selling a TV for a few $100s are much lower than one that used to sell for thousands. There also aren't nearly as many products that render the old ones obsolete. A flat screen TV today is not much different than one 5 years ago. You also have the switch to digital media. Digital movies, music, and the existence of smartphones mean less physical devices are needed. In fact, in 2023, Best Buy, one of the largest electronics retailers in the country, announced that they were getting rid of all DVDs and Blu-rays in their stores. Even more successful chains, such as Best Buy, have not been immune to retail closures. And given the size of their stores, one must wonder how much longer that much space will be needed. And the ongoing switch to digital video games will likely spell an end to GameStop in the not too distant future. The switch to digital media, the decline in overall devices needed, the declining prices of these devices, and the oversupply of retailers for these products will likely mean more defunct companies and many more closures to come. An industry that once seemed unstoppable has a very bleak future at best. How bleak is yet to be seen. Thank you for watching.